Good evening and welcome to Political Cipher. This week we're going to be talking about corruption in politics. And the main topic for this one is there was a breaking news. There was a news article about the BW airport recently in the Maryland Matters that reported that a lucrative BWI airport contract may be rigged. So we're going to be talking about that particular article and the players that are involved. And I would like to welcome my guests, Miss Lisa Ellis, Mr. Bruce Branch, and Mr. Joe Gaskins. And we're going to start off with everyone introducing themselves, and then we're going to hit it to the head. We're going to go right to the jugular.
New text message from Kevin, FBD.
Okay, I'll start off. My name is Bruce Branch. I'm a humble servant of the people, part of Maryland Business and Clergy Partnership. I'm one of the board members. I'm a community activist, and I'm also a business person who has worked with extensively with many of the people that are involved in securing contracts throughout the state of Maryland. And I'm just so delighted that God has allowed me to be here this afternoon.
Thank you. All right. And Miss Ellis?
Hi, I'm Lisa Ellis. Thank you, Quandra, for once again allowing me to participate in this forum. It is very important that the information, the topics that we're discussing are shared and understood, communicated to the broader audience. I am a business owner, Ellis Industries, but I'm also a member of Maryland Business Clergy Partnership, and I advocate constantly for minority inclusion on policy change and legislation. Many of the individuals that are mentioned, as Bruce said in this article, I have worked with as a political strategist. So in understanding the dynamics and what the impact of this means to us as minority business owners regarding the airport contract, it is major. And I'm glad that you're giving us the opportunity to discuss it today.
I'm looking forward to it too. Well, welcome. All right, Mr. Gaskins.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Gaskins. I'm the co-chairman of the Maryland Business Clergy, and it's a pleasure to be on to talk about this timely subject.
Yes. All right. Our first question is, the airport is presently looking for a new contractor to run the concessions operations in the airport. And what does this contract consist of? Who wants to be the first person?
Well, what I would like to do is I would like to put this in some kind of context for your listeners. And to put it into context and to understand, we have to go back some years. When Joe told me about the subject, I went and did a little research. And Maryland has a long and storied history of corruption, particularly when it comes to contracts. I mean, it's not only African Americans, it's white, but an inordinate amount of the people who have been accused, sent to jail, as in anything, are African Americans. Even to the point, some 50 years ago, there was a woman, and maybe you can tell me about this woman. I had never heard of her before. She, in 1974, her name was Dale Anderson. And Dale Anderson was the first comptroller, African American, she was a female, of the city of Baltimore. And she later went to jail for tax evasion. So as I looked over some of these charges, I'm saying, are they just trumped up charges against African Americans, or is just this the way the business is done in the state of Maryland? And when African Americans try to get in the system and do the business the same way, all of a sudden it's illegal. And so to that end, what Joe and I had even spoke of is let's look over the timeline of some of the people who have been, for lack of a better words, compromised in their official duties.
Okay.
And I remember Joe, and he mentioned the guy's name last week. I can't remember his name. He was back with Jolivet and all of those guys, but he was the guy that committed suicide. And I used to think the story was a myth.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, you know who I'm talking about? You mentioned him last week. He won the contract. He had been an advocate, uh, a major business advocate, and they later said he committed suicide.
Oh, you're talking about Baltimore City.
Robert Clay.
Yes.
Robert Clay.
Yeah.
I used to think that was a myth, but I've heard that story so many times now that I think it's indicative of what African American contractors have to endure and elected officials, rather than trying to change the paradigm. I think sometimes they try to be a part of the system. And from that perspective, I think that's where we got with the airport. And we can go over some of the names. The names were too many, and they weren't all African American. I mean, they
I want to respond to that from this contract, which I think is a little bit different because it's really not a contract that this one is anticipated by being an African American uh, directed contract. This one is a little bit different from what you explained it there, Bruce. This one is one that has a lot of individuals involved, and it seems to, from the article, it seems to be a contract, which is number one for the listeners.
Mm-hmm.
It's a contract at the airport that awards the concession operation, and the concession operation is for food, drink, retail, and other hospitality services at the airport. And I think that the dollar amount on this contract is so large, and for such a long period of time, it hasn't been awarded in over 20 years. This is the first time it's been awarded to a new vendor in 20 years. But other individuals have a concern about what's happening, and so what happened was the contract itself was the article was written by Merlin Matters. They had a concern that maybe at the end of the road, this is the end of the road for these legislators who are presently in Annapolis. You're going to have for the first time the governor, the
Controller
comptroller, yes, comptroller.
and
You're
the
going to
treasurer.
have, you got a new attorney general,
Mm-hmm.
and all those, and you have a new treasurer who's been there for less than a year,
Mm-hmm.
all working at the end of the terms, with the exception of the treasurer. And from that particular point of view, I think Merlin Matters studied that a bit. And when this contract came up for award, they deemed the process and studied the process and looked at it and say, look, something's up with this particular contract. Something's going on behind the scene that does not necessarily involve an African American and who's a politician. This is a contract that involves a series of people who are very shrewd in their dealings, and
Yes.
they're leaving the government, and they're planning to take away a stash when they leave. Okay, and I think that's what we're talking about on this particular contract, Quandra.
Yes. Now, the thing is, what I also read is that this is going to be a 20-year contract. Has there ever been a contract that awarded to a contractor that could last that long? So whoever gets this that's chosen will have full control over the concessions in BWI for 20 years?
That's not unusual. That's industry standard for that particular industry. If, for one, you're talking about retail, food services, and so forth, and most of them have to get footed inside of these, get their business off the ground. So typically, it takes a good a few years for that establishment to take place. So 20 years for one contract in that industry is not unusual. What is unusual are the amendments that they put in there that actually enables or basically is tailored to
Mm-hmm.
the particular applicants that are bidding on this contract, which Major Riddick is one and Bruce Bariano being
Mm-hmm.
the other. And with those amendments, one that made it that tapered the language um, so that Major Riddick actually could participate, not saying that it was done solely. I don't want to put that out there and get a slandered lawsuit. But the
Mm-hmm.
way that the article read, it's the what makes my hair stand up is these are two major political insiders, one with Hogan, the other was with Peter Franchot, who sits currently on the board of public works, which would basically be the last awardee that would give this last word to award this contract.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at the hundreds of people that was in the hotel room that are bidding for this, with these two individuals basically being political insiders, having amendments to accommodate them, mainly with one amendment not stating that if you are a minority business owner applying for this contract, that you still have to meet minority participation goals. So
Mm-hmm.
we're still being slated, which is a concern for me, but also in looking at the contract itself, with Francho leaving and Hogan leaving, still leaving with their foot in Maryland government, or actually the money's in their pocket. That's my big aha moment, that we're not looking at, that we're not tailoring down to what exactly is the issue and how do we stop them from awarding this contract, knowing that they're leaving, they're lame ducks.
One of the things, a point of clarification to what you said, uh, although they're over the concessions, they would hire. If I had a Subway
Mm-hmm.
franchise and I wanted to put my Subway franchise in the airport, I would have to go through them.
Yes.
That's the that's the point that must, to me, that must be made. Because if you don't like me,
Mm-hmm.
or if you want to help me as a friend,
Mm-hmm.
then I call you up
Mm-hmm.
as the head of concessions, and I may have a competitor who might be same thing. So that's the power in it, and millions of people go through the airport, and I think that's the distinction.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And in the United States of America, there's never been a black man who ran one,
Mm-hmm.
and so from a presentation standpoint, we don't want to seem like we're attacking the black man that's over this.
Mm-hmm.
However, the partners that are involved don't look like us.
Mm-hmm.
And how much control does he really have?
Mm-hmm.
Is that company an MBE company?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's ever answered that. Is that company dedicated and committed to hiring or giving young African American entrepreneurs an opportunity? Nobody's commenting on that. And I know for a fact, not hearsay, for a fact, when I was a technical writer with one of the major defense contractors,
Mm-hmm.
they would not cheat on a contract, but they would go to the COTA, who's the contracting officer, and say, we want this contract. And because of their political pull, their reputation, the COTA said, I can't just give it to you, but write the RFP
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
in such a way.
Yes.
And my job was tasked. So in other words, if Lisa and I are competing for the contract, and Lisa, for lack of a better good example, the only person that could, in this room, we the four finalists that could win the contract, but the contract has something in it that says the person must have green hair.
Okay, so Lisa got the contract.
And that's what was done with National Harbor and MGM. For every major contract that comes, we see the language, the modifications are tailored to accommodate who they want to receive the
And
contract.
those contracts that are wired, what we call in the industry wired.
Exactly. And we're looking at a new day. We have a new governor coming, new attorney general, a new treasurer. So we have to, not treasurer, comptroller. So what I expect is to have a difference in the climate, that if the same old people are at the table winning the awards and still dictating, then are we looking at real change that we're hoping to come to Maryland, or more of the same? So that's what this awardee represents. I recall Bruce Bariano sending out letters to individuals, business owners and minorities, that says if you wanted to do business basically in Annapolis, then you would encourage individuals to vote for my son to become judge. That type of bullying and tailoring is what we want to do away with in Maryland. What I am looking forward to change in Maryland. I don't want to see. I believe that Peter Francho's campaign was impact, because even though he was saying change, 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 I have the only Black agenda, he had the same individuals that actually were barriers to progress for Black people, gatekeepers, keeping individuals out, like the Barrianos and the Riddick's around him. And individuals see that. We want change. So, they're backing away from doing more of the same. That's why it's critical that we rally right now, minority businesses and individuals, not just minority businesses, but to make sure that this government, that this governor and comptroller are not a party to awarding this contract to these individuals or anyone, period, right now. They should not have the authority to make this award.
And what Lisa has not mentioned, or Joe, and I guess Joe can elaborate on this a little bit if he likes, so I'll go. The president, what makes it really stink is the president or the leader or the manager of the airport authority is an African-American man.
And I think we have his name. I think we do have a question about him.
Yeah, you got a question about it.
And so you have an African-American man. You have a very well-known African-American political operative and business owner for the last 20 years, going back to Glendenning, the first Black chief of staff. You have those two entities. But other than that, there is nothing that shows me this is truly a minority business contract as it's presented to us. On paper, it looks good. On the optics of it looks good. But if you follow the money, it stinks to the high heavens.
Okay, so that.
But why should we? Okay. I'm sorry, but I mean, even if his company, even if he's a shell, we still know that the lion's share of contracting and business has been between the Riddicks, the Barrianos. Why should they be the only beneficiaries when we have hundreds of qualified businesses that should be considered or shortlist, that are not politically savvy, that are not working their way to control politics in the state of Maryland? That's, the fairness of it. I wouldn't care. An example, Cheryl Glenn said, Kathy Hughes, you have one minority owner in gaming at MGM. Aren't you happy that at least one person got in? That's a gatekeeper's mentality instead of looking at equity and fairness across the board. That's what I'm saying when I look at Major Riddick as an African American, the president or the airport authority director as an African American male. I'm looking at equality. Are they gatekeepers, or are they helping to break a cycle of unfairness and helping us to close the gap, the wealth gap, which this contract represents? This is a major, big deal. It would change the livelihood of anyone that is awarded this. It's been proven across the country.
So Lisa, let me ask you a question. In terms of politics, because that's what we're talking about tonight, how does politics play a role in this?
I think that's a question
Politics.
down the road.
Yeah.
That's a question down the road. All right. Well,
Okay.
let me make a statement then. Let me make an editorial statement. There was a movie called Django. Some people call me Django. And there was a guy by the name of Steven in the movie Django. Everybody else on the plantation for years were slaves, got treated horribly. But Steven, he was always treated good.
That's right.
He sat at the master's table, ate the master's food, even told the master what to do from time to time. I think this is the same thing. We had the same mentality that we have now. The same people who get in the master's house, eat the master's food, go to the wizards with the master. By the way, I've been invited to some of them games too.
Okay.
They're the ones that eat. They're the ones that eat good, while the rest of us stand outside the gate or the big house, scratching just to get in and get some scraps from the table.
Bruce, I'm not as great of an orator as you. You so eloquently put that together and painted that picture in my mind. Like, damn was my response. Damn. However, you know, we've got to work towards eradicating the Willie Lynch syndrome. And we see that throughout the country right now because it's divided. The country is very much so divided. And we know why it's divided. We know that we have gatekeepers and the same old individuals, but that's where good advocacy comes in. That's why we have to rally to educate the broader audience on not just, and not come across as just angry Black people, but what does this mean to the 6,000 businesses in Prince George's County that are certified minority companies looking to scale their businesses, or the 25-something hundred in Charles County that are looking to scale their businesses but cannot. They're certified, they follow the rules, went through the process, and dotted the I's and crossed the T's, but they're never able to make it to the next level because we have not legislated policies that will prevent Varianos and Riddicks and the sorts from basically bullying and manipulating the lion's share of all procurement in the state of Maryland. That's a problem for me.
As politically, and I was trying to think, and maybe there are some instances, politically, this might be the first time when a Black man had this kind of juice to manipulate a contract of this size using his political influence in the state of Maryland. I can't think of another instance.
Okay.
Quandra.
Yes.
I think you're going to hit those questions. I think they got you all over the place. But what was your question number 3?
I know. So why is this contract? So we're going to double up. Why is this contract such a big deal? And what is at stake? And wait a minute, Mr. Bruce, because you're on fire, and I got that. And why is this? So this is one question. Why is this contract such a big deal, and what is at stake? And the next question is tied to this. Why do others think that this contract is rigged? So that's a combination. Why is this contract such a big deal, and what is at stake?
Well, why is this contract such a big deal and what is at stake? Well, a lot of that's been discussed before, but the purpose is to improve. The overall purpose is to improve on a very good airport concession and make it exceptional. This is the first time that the state has sought a new vendor, as we've said before, in 2 decades. They haven't done that. So what we're challenged with in making a decision on this particular contract and the fairness of making a decision on this particular contract is how do we make it better? And you certainly don't make it better by having this contract directed at any person, whether they're Black, white, Asian, Hispanic or whatever, it should be a fair process that this goes through, because on the other side of the process, there is behind the scenes things that you don't see. So while Bruce might see an African American male getting a major contract, other people see a front operation that's got somebody else involved in the operation.
Mhm.
Now, and that's I think that's why this article was printed. It it looked overall at the contract and said this contract may be rigged. Everything about this contract shows that it may be rigged. And
Mhm.
the reason why that was said is because of the players at the table, so that the audience understand what takes place. First, in an RFP, if there's an RFP that's released, the content of the RFP is at play for all who wish to submit a bid proposal. So what you do, and what I would do, and what Bruce and Lisa would do with their company, is that they would submit a proposal based on the RFP. Now, in an RFP process, there's a step that allows for addendum to be issued
Mhm.
during the contract.
Mhm.
And in this particular case, two addendums were issued.
Right.
One was a requirement the that the business person who is submitting a proposal, the company, have a certain amount of years within the industry. I think it was 7 years
Mhm.
that they were required. Then there was an addendum that was released that says, okay, you don't have to do that anymore. Take the 7 years out.
Mhm.
This was alarming, and allow this person to do it based on the experience of the people that's on this new company that's submitting a proposal. While
Mhm.
the new company that's submitting a proposal is a company called New Market Development.
Yes.
And this company is associated with two of the state's most well-known political players, Major Reddick and Bruce
Use.
Barriana.
Mhm.
And the sequence so far has left some airport management professionals wondering about the integrity of the process. So they are questioning the efficacy of putting such a financially consequential and long-lasting decision in the hands of a lame duck board of public works. And they're saying, some are even going so far and saying that this stinks. The
Mhm.
entire process stinks, and they don't want to be a part of it. And they are saying that what they're going to do is file a complaint if this contract moves forward with being awarded. And it's
Mhm.
from what I've looked at it and said, and I kind of look at it, I don't want to make a decision until individuals have clearly had a chance to say that we're not going to review it, because the governor and the comptroller, but it's really up to the governor. He's the governor to say that I'm going to pull this. I'm not going to make this award now. I'm going to let the next governor step up to the table and to award this, which I would do, so that I don't walk out uh, being labeled a governor who people are saying was a part of a fix. So what we're looking at on the other stage, as Lisa said, is that the MBE component. Normally, when you issue a requirement that the MBE component would be uh, in place
Mhm.
when you're doing a bid, and it's not normally a normal part of the process. What you
Mhm.
do is you issue a list of MBEs that you plan to put in place, but you have 30 days, in some cases 45 to 60 days to submit your MBEs to the table. If you're not successful, then they will take the contract from
Mhm.
you. That's the proper process, and they will
Mhm.
award it to the next person who meets those requirements. But consequently, and quite often during this particular administration, they have never, with Peter Francho and Larry Hogan at the helm, they've even knocked out the qualifications for MBE to take place. Period. But by allowing that clause to be put in place,
Mm-hmm.
it would suggest that you are telling all those other individuals who don't have the advantage of this newly created company that's going to be an MBE that's going to be filing, and it will probably be the only MBE that's certified by MDOT at the table, which gives that company a unfair advantage. And that's what individuals are looking at, and they are saying there's a problem with this. Now, again, it's going to be up to those two people who have the votes to do it. On the Board of Public Works, the governor and the comptroller decided whether they're going to act on this particular contract.
Okay, and we have a question about that. So, why is this contract such a big deal, and what is at stake, Mr. Branch?
I think Joe eloquently, well, actually, it was Lisa who talked about wealth.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's always about changing the ordinary to do the extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Thomas Jefferson
Okay.
who said elected officials who don't work need to be replaced by elected officials who do. The easy way out is to get my friends, get together, and we all say how we can pay. It's a big deal because, one, this is more money, Black folks' taxpayer dollars, that are going to a project where we don't benefit. It's a big deal because
Mm-hmm.
there are entrepreneurs who can create generational wealth.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big deal because people who look like us really have a chance to show the world how great we really are.
Mm-hmm.
As I was thinking about this deal, I also thought about the fact that I still call them the Redskins, but they're really called the Commodores. I mean, the Commanders. I always call them the Commanders now, and how that deal went down, and how they're now to be sold, and how the NFL has a great opportunity to allow minority investors to come in and really be a part of African American community.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big deal, and it's at stake for us because when do we get our chance to bite at the apple? When do we get our chance to play on an equal fair on a fair field?
Mm-hmm.
As the Supreme Court tackles the issue of affirmative action, one of the things that keep coming up is that there's no need. Well, if we run in a 100-yard race, and every time we run the 100-yard race, you start 10 yards from the finish line, and I start at the start line, I have a very difficult time in beating you.
Mm-hmm.
But if we both start
Mm-hmm.
at the start line and you beat me fair and square.
Right.
But that's what happens with these contracts. We never get a chance to start at the same place as our competitors do because they'll figure a way to gerrymander, to render, to use their political influence.
Mm-hmm.
Joe has been kind. Lisa kind of touched on it. But Bruce Barriano has long tentacles like an octopus into Maryland politics.
Mm-hmm.
And he has helped raise money for all those candidates that he deemed worthy, for lack of a better, politically worthy. Okay? And so those relationships come to play. But this is the first time I've ever seen him back out as a lobbyist and be a part as a investor, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
So why would a person do that?
It's a new day, Bruce. Of course, it is a new day. Hogan is going out. We have Westmore that's coming in. It's a new day. And in order to flip the page, like I said earlier, to me, that was Francho's downfall. is putting old players around him and thinking that was going to equal a win. Westmore did the opposite somewhat. Now, the elephant in the room for me in that article was the Smith, as a Westmore chief chair of his campaign, also had a fundraiser, um, and invited individuals that have a stake in the airport contract. So we've got to expose and make sure that we hold individuals accountable. And to do that, first is to stop this one from moving forward, but also to educate people on this is how it's done. We're not mad at the game for them being progressive, aggressive enough to do their homework and want to get in front of a procurement, but we want to also be progressive enough to literally say that we need policy to help protect the fairness in the game so that it can level the playing field and everyone will have a fair opportunity to compete, whether you get shortlisted or not, minority or not. This game is rigged, and Buriano is always at the front of less. How do I narrowly tailor this so that it benefits me, and also Riddick? So I mean, I'm not going to dismiss the history of what's been happening in Maryland and why I'm upset that someone from Westmore's camp equally is at the table to
Lisa, you got
That's a
basically try
question.
to do that.
That's a question.
That's incorrect, Lisa. Westmore doesn't have anybody at the table on this one. Uh, the article listed the fundraising event that Bruce Barriana and Ricky Smith gave for Westmore, but it did not implicate anybody from the Westmore team as being a part of it. The three players at the table are clearly identified as Ricky Smith, who's got to make the decision, Bruce Barriana, who has the relationship, very strong relationship with Hogan, and Major Reddick, who has been at the airports since Parish Glendenning. Those are the three main players. In order for them let me finish. In order for them to move forward on this, what they have attempted to do is to do a fundraiser for Westmore, as numerous people, including Darrell Barnes and other people, after they lost the election, they came back and says, okay, traditionally in the process, they says, let me give a fundraiser and be okay. And this is what was done. So they reached out to the law firm in which the chair, Westmore's chair, worked for, and asked them to come in to help to host this for them, which is a clever political move on behalf for Barriana and Major to do. But even more sinister for Barriana, Bruce, because he's very, very good at this. So what he does is attempt to do that. Now, I don't know, I can't say what they were conspiring to do, but it would seem to me that what they wanted to do out of this is to keep things status quo. Have the contract to be awarded, and also to benefit from the fact that they were capable of raising over close to $200,000 for this, and keep Ricky his job at the airport so that they could do business as usual for another 20 years. So that is really what's behind the sinister part of this, and that's why individuals are complaining who are competing in this particular process, is that they are saying that, again, the great powers who control Annapolis for so long have come together to bring a black individual, and that person being Reddick, and a major lobbyist to the table, Bruce Barriana, to use their political clout and use their politicians who are on their last leg, and that would be Francho and Hogan, to make this deal work.
And
But
everything you said is correct, but it's one thing they were protecting their interests. 200,000 gets a candidate's attention.
Mm-hmm.
So
it gets their attention, but it's a drop in the bucket. And I wasn't saying that Westmore is involved. I'm saying that as the chair of his campaign, he's not green. He's not new to this. So to really,
Yes, the person is new. This is a new person. He's not affiliated with the campaign. He's not the chair. So you're reading the article wrong. He's not a day-to-day operational person. He works for the law firm. The chair of his campaign is Ned
okay,
Miller. Okay, all right. So clear that up.
Okay.
okay.
Next question. Who runs the airport? And when is the recommended vendor expected to be announced?
well, Ricky runs the airport,
Okay.
and I would say that the vendor. I think this contract will be held up. It has to be because of the scrutiny that it has received. So I would say that they can't award this contract. I don't look for the contract now to be awarded until the new governor takes place. Even
Yeah.
though they will vote on they, even though they will vote on it now, they will. I was trying to think. It was another contract that was sort of similar to this, where they held it up like this, but I can't remember. But but I do think because of the scrutiny, everybody will run for a little cover and try to protect the backsides politically of everyone, so that it'll be amenable to the public.
I tell you, Bruce Bariano is bold. Peter Francho don't give a snap. Basically, I think he's bitter because he lost, and he's like, I'm going to serve my term and do my job up until the very end. Meaning that I'm going to award this contract. This was part of a part of the deal that I made with them. I'm just putting it out there the way the article read, but I think it's going to happen. I mean, literally, we've seen so much. We've seen Martin O'Malley call back the legislators 3 times to push gaming through when they said no repeatedly. So we've seen political bullying take place in Annapolis and against the will of the people. So this is against the will of the people. Whether Hogan and Francho are going to say, okay, let's let something this big, this major, be handled by the incoming governor, that would be the gentleman thing to do, as well as the fairness for individuals that are competing. But I don't believe that's going to happen.
Let me respond to that. And Bruce was the one that point on it in terms of the timing on this and when it could do. And he's right. If they decided they were going to move forward, it would take place late November or early December before the new governor, whether that be Wes Moore, whether it be Dan Cox, took took the official seat there, and then at that particular point in time, there would be a major protest that would actually take place uh, at that level, and possibly an FBI investigation at that point that could move forward, and it could be initiated by uh, the some of the individuals that you haven't seen at play in this article. Even Dan Cox people could try to tie this into a piece that would sink, that would come after Larry Hogan and Peter Franchot. I think those are people he would go after, which is not unusual for him because he went after Governor Larry Hogan and requested he be impeached. So I think the right wing Republicans could possibly say, let's get Larry now because he is vulnerable. Now, what the FBI would have to do on this one is decide whether we want to step into the state of Maryland to do this. So the smart way out for them is to not award it. I would go even further. I would say that Larry Hogan, with political ambitions, that go beyond just the governor would be very foolish to put all of those things at risk for his next move. Nobody can tell what a person would do. Now, what does Peter have to lose in this whole thing? Well, I think Peter has to go home and be comfortable in his home. Now, I don't think that would mean that he would go home to his home with a possible FBI investigation haunting him and his wife Anne, I think that's her name, uh, uh, coming after him and being uncomfortable under this circumstances. So, while we look at this and say that, okay, is this award really worth the risk? Really worth the risk? And I think that's what's going to happen, is what's being happened beyond what we're discussing here. Things are being analyzed, and the more discussions that are like this that get out there, it will probably make individuals a little bit more hesitant about sitting in a jail cell.
Okay. So the next question, what roles does Ricky Smith have in the selection process, and how does his decision making impact this process?
Well, I can respond a little bit on where Ricky sits. A little background on that. Ricky is the Maryland Aviation Administration operates the BWI Marshall Airport, and also operates another airport here called the Martin State Airport in Middle River. And he is the top leader in the current role as executive director. He is responsible for all contracts. He serves as a chief operating officer at both agencies. He has done this under Governor Bob Ehrlich. He goes back that far. And him and Larry Hogan were both in Ehrlich's administrations. All right, now Smith left that aviation administration when O'Malley came in, and he ran the Cleveland airport system for several years. And when Hogan was elected, Hogan reached back out and brought Smith back in to run the airport again. He is known to be close to Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford, who also worked as a federal bureaucrat. Also served as the Maryland Department of General Services under Ehrlich, and who is now the Lieutenant Governor under the state of Maryland. So the circle gets a little bit larger in this entire process.
All right, Mr. Branch.
I think Joe gave you the technical part of it.
Okay.
I'll put it in the. I'll give you the human part of it.
Okay.
And here's the way I see it. While he may not directly have a say in the contract, because I'm sure they have some sort of committee that scores the applications and overlooks. I do believe the president would have to sign off on any contract.
Okay.
And if I'm a worker, an employee, just common sense would tell me, I don't know about anybody else, that my boss, if I know somebody is my boss's favorite, I'm not going to rock the boat, for lack of a better word, because I want to make my boss happy.
Okay.
And so he has a latent impact on the selection process, because he is the big dog in the house.
Okay. All right, Miss Ellis.
I feel personally that mess rolls down. Mid-level management are the career individuals that are making these decisions, but we do know that it rolls down. So the direction is coming from the head. We saw the same behavior with the medical marijuana and the first awarding of the first 15 licenses by the commission. And we knew that the commission was influenced by political leaders and their bosses. That's why the commission was originally changed. So the same thing that we're looking at here, the influences from Smith to mid-level management and the procurement will have a total effect on who the contract is actually awarded to.
All right. Joe.
Yes. We're talking about the contract and other components of the contract being that for the last 18 years of this particular contract, the contract has been held by Fraport, okay, USA. Now, Fraport is a company that's based in Pittsburgh and that's affiliated with the international company based in Frankfurt, Germany.
Mm-hmm.
The contract technically has changed hands a few times. Ownership has changed in the company. Now, what happened on this one, and this will clearly let your listeners visualize how this really rolled out. Fraport, because it had some problems in Pittsburgh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, prepared, started out with one company, then created a subsidiary called BAA in Maryland. Uh, and the company, and by changing its name and ownership, uh, they were now a new entity operating, but they had again ran into trouble in terms of performance in other
Mm-hmm.
areas. So you couldn't take that dirty performance any further. So what it did was said that got put their heads together. This is how individuals look at it and said this doesn't make sense because
Mm-hmm.
of the individuals who are upfront on this are big time players. But because they couldn't come do this contract on the frat port, they, and by the way, they were represented by Bruce Mariana. Uh, and they decided, okay, Major has some experience with food concessions at the airport, not managing the airport food concessions.
Mm-hmm.
Let's bring Major Reddick into the picture and let him be the owner of this minority company, and let's put some people behind now. And so essentially, this whole deal was a piece that was structured. And if it hadn't gotten any attention, it would have looked good on paper. But the Fraport people are the people who moved over to Major's company that really doesn't have a contract. But it has resumes of extremely qualified individuals on that team. So if you look at the team, it has experience individually.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what hit this whole deal that looked at it and says, okay, everybody else at the table says, no, you had a 7-year requirement. You just can't grab people from a company, especially a company that's failed, that did bad business. But you can do that. You can do that if your chief lobbyist is very powerful in the state of Maryland. So that's what role that Bruce inferred to that Mariana would play in making this deal work for that particular company. He, from my perspective, only from my perspective, and I surmise this, is he looked at the deal because normally a lobbyist would say, okay, I'll represent you guys. But it must be such a lucrative deal that he didn't say, let me represent you guys. His plan is to come in as a financial investor in the deal. And this is what was reported in the news article. So now you see the emerging of a very powerful group of individuals who now are going to move forward with making this contract go in one particular direction. And the rationale and the reasoning for them going and moving this thing in a direction that they think that they can get the governor and the comptroller and Ricky, who's sitting in this position. But Ricky, if you look at the risk with Ricky, Ricky's thing is if this goes sour, it's like the guy who was at Watergate,
Mm-hmm.
and I bring this up. The black guy who was Watergate, who who was the guy who busted everybody. He was at the break-in, and at the end of the day, he instead of being celebrated as a human, as a hero, he died a culprit. Okay, poor, very poor. I think at one particular point in time was homeless. If Ricky is not very careful, he will never get another job again. Certainly not as a director at any airport, doing anything. That's not going to happen. So individuals seem to bounce back, such as the lobbyist here. Bruce bounces back. He's already spent time. He's been incarcerated. He spent time. He came back, and now he's worked as probably the most successful lobbyist in the state of Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
But African Americans, at the end of the day, are the individuals who are used as pawns in the entire structure. Major has gone over during the entire length of his career as a person who has always been the insider in all different administrations. But at the end of the day, do you want the title of a guy who's going to get prosecuted? Are you thinking that you have enough juice? You really have enough juice to beat the feds if they decide to come after you for racketeering and collusion? So, hopefully they'll clean up this mess and we won't have what happened during Nixon's administration. Nixon's administration, everybody looks at Nixon and says, okay, well, he did the break-in at Watergate, did that, but they didn't look at the guy from the state of Maryland who was Agnew, who was the lieutenant governor from Maryland. And that was the first time that the lieutenant governor of Maryland was forced to resign he's sitting there as a lieutenant governor, but he was forced to resign. And it never has ever happened. And so Maryland kind of covers up that dirty portion because as it relates to them, he was a former governor. They look at that as, okay, this is gone and Nixon is the guy. But he was the guy who was steering contracts similar to this in the state of Maryland during that entire time to companies by the name of Green, I think, engineering contracts, major engineering contracts. They played a major role in doing the same thing. Hopefully, the state of Maryland can avoid this mess. They can clean up the act. They won't be greedy during this particular process, and they'll look at what was just what they thought was maybe a news article that will go away. They'll look at this and look at the seriousness that they might be facing.
Okay, so you did answer. Has this potential conflict occurred in the recent history of the state of Maryland?
Yes.
And Joe forgot to mention Marvin Mandel.
Yes.
And then you said Dale Anderson as well, right?
1994. I believe Mandel and Agnew were back like 72.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, so we're going to have another question. Why is the process such an issue, and what does it have to do with the Board of Public Works members, Governor Hogan, Comptroller Peter Franchot, and Treasurer Derek Jones?
Derek Davis, I'm sorry.
Derek Davis, excuse me, Derek Davis.
For me, it's real simple.
Okay.
The major contracts have to come before the Board of Works. And unless they agree, those contracts, even if they won those contracts, they don't get awarded. And we've had the same, with the exception of the governor, which changes from probably every 8 years or so. We basically have had the same 2 or 3 board members. So if you work with someone for a long time, you usually gain some kind of affinity for them. And so those same contracts those people see,
Mhm.
those same contracts, those people know who the players are. And one thing about contracts, they like to give contracts to people that they feel comfortable with, not newcomers.
Yes, and we know that regardless of the amendments that's in this current contract that has been proposed, the Board of Public Works has the final say. So
Right.
even though it's narrowly tailored to eradicate the 7-year requirement that you had to be in business to allow for a major Riddick's company to be able to compete, once it reaches the Board of Public Works, they have the opportunity to reject it, which in this case, I don't believe that will happen. If it makes it to the Board of Public Works, it's going to be rubber stamped.
And I would also venture to say we can't find another contract in history where a startup company has won an award this large.
Exactly. Exactly. And, we've seen minority participation under Hogan go down for African Americans. We've seen Peter Francho favor one company over another with using Bowie State as an example. The need for quality pianos for the students were rejected and seen as flamboyant by him, yet he chose to side with the then governor was O'Malley to award monies to help build out National Harbor when they had the seniors convention there.
Mhm.
Misappropriation of funds, and the awardee of that contract had to be bailed out as a political favor. And Peter Francho agreed to bail those people out. So we've seen the Board of Public Works work on behalf of political insiders and big businesses. This would be the first time that a new company would be awarded it, as Bruce is saying.
And for conversation piece or to give what the other side thinks, I spoke to your chairman of the Maryland Black Caucus, who's very close to Mr. Smith, and he knows Mr. Major Riddick, as we all do. And when I sent him the article, he said his response was, "This is disgraceful. We're just trying to hold another black man down." It was lost on him, all the noise around the article and why people might be upset.
Mhm.
And the quote, and I quote him directly, "Yeah, white people do it all the time."
So that makes it acceptable. So that makes it
I think for
acceptable.
nobody else, I'm just saying what I was told.
Yeah, I understand that, but just putting it out there, the mentality of some of our leaders, and yet they continue to get elected. Just because it has already been done or another race has inappropriately abused the system, we're saying jump on board and inappropriately do the same. I mean, just disregard policy, laws, and legislation and the arguments and people's sacrifices. I have an issue with that.
Okay.
Speaking of those politicians, the same people
Mhm.
would say the same thing about Jack Johnson. Yeah, he took money, but white politicians do it all
Okay.
the time. And I hear that refrain, that recurring refrain, many, many times when it comes to malfeasance in office by African American
Mhm.
elected officials or people in high positions. And so, as Lisa, she spoke of the Willie Lynch theory, it's difficult for us to get people away from that
Mhm.
simply because we are so used to doing business as usual. Many
Mhm.
of us are afraid to speak out. Many of us are afraid to speak up. And many of us won't rock the boat for fear of reprisal.
We make excuses for poor behavior, and we have to stop that. And to stop, like Cheryl Glenn said, Aren't you happy that just one made it in? When you look at the ratio of us in
Mm-hmm.
the state, to say, aren't you happy that one of us made it at the table? Come on,
Okay.
like seriously, dude. No, I'm not happy, and I will not settle for that or make excuses for bad behavior. If Jack was wrong, Jack should have went to jail.
He certainly did.
No, I'm just saying,
Yeah,
I mean, we cannot, we should not. There are too many good legislators out here, individuals that want to do the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
companies that have sacrificed and worked hard to even be at the table or considered in the room to just
Mm-hmm.
say, well, let's give an excuse just because other cultures do it. That's like, no,
Okay.
not at all.
All right. So let's ask
Integrity
this.
should matter.
Yeah. Integrity should always matter.
Yes.
Always.
on political cipher, but not in politics.
Okay. Well, the
Oh,
intent is to get it in politics and to motivate the viewers to go out and vote so that we can pick those leaders that do have integrity so that we don't have conversations like rigging or illegal, making things illegal practices. So, how does Governor Hogan, Controller Peter Francho, and Rick Smith feel about awarding a contract at the end of their lame duck terms? And that is a quote from the article. Lame duck terms.
The terms are lame up.
Mhm.
But I don't think any of us can get inside their head. We could speculate,
Okay, well that's speculative.
and I think we beat that horse pretty good. We
Okay.
know what Rick has at stake. We know with Francho. Uh, there's where there's smoke, there's usually fire. Um, if you follow the money trail, not today, but maybe 5 years from now, maybe some
Mhm.
board, maybe some other uh, plush assignment.
Mhm.
Or, we don't know for sure, but we can all speculate. And we do have an African American U.S. Attorney General. I think the onus would be on him. His name is Eric Byrne.
Mhm.
But I don't know what relationships he had because he was a state legislator
Mhm.
in Annapolis with many of the people we're talking about. Um, so we have to wait and see
Mhm.
how the politics play out. Behind the scene is always the politics. Because someone who's pulling the strings could come say, all right, let's change this up a little bit. We'll do it a different way. Who knows? Right now, they might be creating another company to win and redo the whole thing. I mean, I would put nothing past any of them
Mhm.
because that is the environment in which we live in the
Mhm.
state of Maryland.
All right, Joe.
Well, Bruce certainly made the voters upset about this. I guess they won't turn out to vote. Uh, I, I,
No, we
I
don't want
hope.
that. We want you to
Yeah, we
vote.
don't. We gotta get them up a little bit. Look,
Yeah.
one thing we have to make sure that individuals who are watching this
Mhm.
understand that we are definitely individuals who go way beyond what normal people would do. We challenge
Mhm.
wrongs and injustices,
Mhm.
regardless of who's committing them, and regardless of how powerful they might deem themselves to be. They're just human individuals who,
Mhm.
if you give them too much leeway, they'll become Donald Trumps of the world and eventually try to take
Oof.
over. The more you give them, the more they reach for. So we cannot allow these wrongs to move forward just
Mhm.
because someone states that the white guy got away with doing it. That is the worst excuse for doing something. Maybe I lived the wrong life all these years, but
Mhm.
I hope I did not. I would never go on and say that I did wrong, but Johnny Monsini, because he was Italian, he got away with doing it. But it was wrong it was wrong. Both of
Right.
us were wrong. Now I can't use that to justify my wrongness.
Mm-hmm.
I can I can see an injustice, a injustice against individuals when it's injustice. I can't appreciate and will not sit back and watch while other individuals are killed on the street
Mm-hmm.
by cops or anything else that's wrong, by wrongs against other individuals are done. And those are the things that I think as Americans, as voters, we have to understand that if we justify one injustice, we have to uh, justify all of them. And so while these individuals might carry the titles and might try to come back again, we have to let it known, and nobody's guilty. We are not accusing anybody of doing this. We're just only highlighting what was printed,
Mm-hmm.
and we are dissecting that and looking at it and projecting it. But but clearly something is fishy about this deal, and we as individuals have to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to hope that Francho will say, go beyond what he stated. Francho said last week that the comptroller intends to vote on all items that come before Board of Public Works until he leaves
Exactly.
office early this next year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now whether this means that he's going to vote on this one regardless of where it goes, or whether he votes yes or no on it as an injustice is questionable. What does he mean by that? And also, Hogan basically said that he was not going to respond to this. Davis, the state treasurer, uh, who will become the senior member when Hogan and Francho leave office, say he has mixed feelings about the matter being
Mm-hmm.
taken up during the current board's final four meetings. So he's a little hesitant, and you can understand that he would understand what is at stake here because he's got a career. He just stepped into being the
Mm-hmm.
treasurer, and he's got to determine whether he can take a beating here and then come
Mm-hmm.
back and run again with a challenge against a person that will talk about his
What he
involvement
did.
in the process. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so all those things will not go away because you got this major group out here called Common Cause.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the individuals who have exposed this and spent a lot of time dealing with this. And believe me, they were not a group that started this morning and decided that they were going to get some press time out of putting this
Mm-hmm.
out there. Other newspapers, and Bruce, you said also WTOP has picked this story up and they're going
Mm-hmm.
with it. And you will see other newspapers who will come along on this because it's too big.
Mm-hmm.
It's too big for them to not to be involved in the process. Do you back a friend because they were governor or comptroller? Do you help to cover it up, the process, or do they take care of themselves by saying we're not going to deal with this?
Mm-hmm.
We call for this to go to the new governor. Just turn it over and give it to him. And then clearly at that particular point in time, there's no longer a story, and they can squash it themselves. Or are they going to be driven by the desire, money grab
Mm-hmm.
that individuals have pushed out there in front of them, and the two individuals, Major Reddick and Barry Allen, while they're going to be driven, their career is driven by this,
Mm-hmm.
their involvement, and says that we're going to deliver to you no matter what happens to us. You know, all those questions are questions that remain to be seen, and it's going to be interesting as this deal further unfolds. And I just look forward to see what happens over the next 30 to 60 days.
Okay, last question. What can be done to assure a fair process and prevent the appearance of illegalities and rigging contracts within the state of Maryland. Lisa.
I would say exposure, exposure, exposure. Transparency is everything. List the individuals that are bidding.
Mm-hmm.
Show the process online live of the bidding process.
Mm-hmm.
Show reveal who the individuals that are um, sitting on the committees, the procurement officers. When the amendments are made, where's the justification for the amendments that are
Mm-hmm.
being made, and the times that the amendments are being put forward. Notification periods, notifications of the contract award that is coming forward, not within just a 20 or 30-day window, but that was one of the barriers to success for African Americans in particular in a disparity study that was conducted in 2020 in Prince George's County. The notification and the marketing by the agency of when these procurements are pipelined and projected to come forth
Mm-hmm.
is too short, and it leaves us to wonder or to basically think that there's an injustice that's taking place, even if it isn't. So for me, exposure, exposure, exposure. Let's do greater transparency in the process. Put it online where individuals can see clearly what's happening at every level and every phase, and allow the what do you call that, the recap, to give individuals the opportunity to understand, the debriefing is what I was looking for, the
Mm-hmm.
debrief on the procurements, so that those companies that are bidding for the first time can then assess their success and failures and where they have room for improvement.
Okay. Mr. Branch.
I agree 100% with what Lisa says, but let me put it in layman's terms what she said. Some of you who grew up less in a less fortunate way have seen a roach before.
Okay.
And one thing about roaches, they don't like it when lights turn on.
Okay.
They run.
Okay.
So when we turn the light on the roaches, and we need shows like this, and we need true African American journalists who are vigilant and do their homework and be responsible members of the fourth estate,
Mm-hmm.
they can turn the light on, as well as people in the community,
Mm-hmm.
various organizations. They can turn the light on the roaches that keep infesting our
Mm-hmm.
contractual process.
Okay.
And to that end, if we can do that, uh, uh, Martin Luther King once said, bad men prosper when good men remain silent.
Okay.
And what has happened over the years is a lot of bad men have prospered because people knew what was going on, but to keep their jobs, to keep their homes, to keep their lofty positions, to stay in office, they keep their mouth shut and turn a blind eye to corruption.
Whoa, that's a okay, Joe. You have to follow that.
The only way I'm gonna follow that is to say this. Show up. You got tomorrow. Tomorrow is the last day to go out and vote. In the
Yeah, for
early
early voting,
election,
yes.
you have Tuesday to finally close this out.
Mm-hmm.
This culture of improper, illegal, rewarding, rigging contracts can only be solved if we have a change in government and we elect people who have moral and honest uh, characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
So evaluate your elected officials who are your candidates that are running for elected office and come out in numbers. Because believe me, the some of these individuals at the table will do a lot worse than what we're seeing here. I know on the gubernatorial level, that's why I'm supportive of Westmore, because I know what the alternative will be if we have someone in office like a Dan Cox. I know that he will
Got
be
that right.
deemed to be a extension of Donald Trump. It's the same thing with the Walkers down in the Walker. What's his name? Bruce
Herschel.
Herschel Walker down in Georgia.
And
You
by the
know,
way, we need somebody who walk. We need somebody that can run.
hey, I heard that one. Yeah, but that's all I say. Is show up and show up well. And at the end of the day, on Tuesday night, hopefully we'll know what the number is. That means that we did well. And we don't do well, we'll know that we won on Friday or Saturday or Sunday after the final vote is counted. So I just want to encourage everybody to get out and vote.
Okay, now, Mr. Branch. I
Um,
did when I was younger. Herschel Walker was like the thing for my brothers and I to look up to.
well, my first assignment in 1979 was covering Herschel Walker's signing at the University of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And I had DC tags, and I was speeding to the event,
Mm-hmm.
and a state trooper pulled me over. He said, "Well, boy, what you doing?" And at the time, Georgia had a hard time in securing the services of African American star players.
Mm-hmm.
They loved them so much down there. His mother got a job. They named him an honorary white person. And when the police, no, this is true. This is
Are you
absolutely,
serious?
yeah, he's an honorary white person in Wrightsville, Georgia. She was the only one that worked in the, his brother was let out of jail who had a 20-year sentence.
My goodness.
He wanted to go to USC because he idolized O.J. Simpson.
Mm-hmm.
And when the cop stopped me, and he said, "Where you going, boy?" He thought I was going to Florida. I said, "Herschel Walker just signed with Georgia." The cop said, "Hot damn. How about them dogs?" He said, "I'll take you there myself." And I got a police escort to the high school.
Yeah. Well,
it
I don't
says it
think
all.
I
that,
know who Herschel Walker is.
mm-hmm. I don't think Herschel Walker. I think he should just stay in the football lane because I look at it
I
like
agree.
he has been told by the white man what to do, how to play, how to run, how to sit, everything. So like
All the time.
he all the time for all his life. So
He's like Steven. He's lived a great life. He has money.
right, and he's living
He's
a great
that
life.
house Negro on Django that you talked about, Bruce.
I said Steven. I said Steven.
Oh, I couldn't think of his name.
The one from the gentleman that played by oh my goodness, what is this?
Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel Jackson.
Yes, indeedy.
You let him sleep on your sheets. See, Joe, Lisa, and I, we're like this. When they see us, some people would say, if the big house had caught on fire, Stephen and Herschel would say, "Massa, massa, our house is on fire."
Right.
Me and Joe and Lisa outside said, we be wishing for a good wind to be saying, "Burn, baby, burn." And those are the kind of African Americans that we need in the legislature and in all aspects of life in the state of Maryland.
Okay. So one thing I want to thank Donnie Glover to give me this opportunity. I want you to let you know that these are our opinions. These are our opinions. However, it is very important that you go out and vote. Tomorrow is the last day for early voting. You should show up, show out. It's not only that, yes, we will make history by having our first African American governor, but you need to, like Joe said, research, read that ballot, read the ballot, understand.
There's a lot on it.
Yes, it is. Look at those. Look at who is going to represent you in Annapolis. It's very important. Who's going to be handling your money? Who's going to be making those decisions? And then you see who is on the Board of Public Works. Who do you want advocating for you on the Board of Public Works? I mean,
and the amendment question, the question 1 through 5, I think it's 5 questions from the Supreme Court, appellate court becoming the Supreme Court, legalizing marijuana for recreation use. So pay attention, get out and vote. Your vote and your input is so needed. So I encourage everyone to please get out and vote.
On that note, anyone?
That's all she wrote.
That's all she wrote.
That's all she wrote. So good night, everyone. Thank you, Quandra.
Thank you, and thank you for
good night.
joining us for Political Cipher. If you would like to be a guest, because in 2 more weeks, we have a special guest.
Absolutely.
We have a special guest very soon. So on that note, thank you and have a wonderful night. But guess what? The report card is coming next week. I just haven't had a chance to put the people that I want to do a thumbs down who are in office. But I want everybody to go out and vote first.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.